Across this very field as dawn was breaking in October 1944, 35 men, with bayonets fixed, raced headlong towards more than 250 heavily armed SS. In the minutes that followed, and in an episode immortalised in the series Band of Brothers, Captain Dick Winters and the men of Easy Company rained chaos across this now peaceful landscape. But how exactly did that episode come about? What really happened on that day? And do the events around this crossroads match to those presented on screen? In this video, using the latest technology, wartime aerial imagery, and the actual accounts of those who were there, we'll explore the charge at Heteren Crossroads. In order to do that, we need to understand the situation as it stood in early October 1944. Just 2 weeks earlier, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's bold plan to cross the River Rhine at Arnhem and end the war before Christmas had been launched. Beset by problems and poor management, it had failed, but had gained some ground. Amongst that newly won territory was this patch of land, known as the Island. Bordered on all sides by waterways, including the mighty rivers Rhine and Waal to north and south, it was a key area of ground. When Operation Market Garden failed south of the Rhine, the Allies worked hard to expand the narrow corridor right up to the river and secure the flanks to both east and west. But the value of this ground wasn't lost on the Germans, who were also desperate to retake this bridge across the Waal at Nijmegen. And so, by early October, the scene was set for a bloody encounter which would decide control of the island. The men tasked with consolidating this area came predominantly from the US 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. By now, veterans of Normandy and Market Garden, they had a solid reputation on the battlefield. Amongst their units was the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Let's take a look. Like all paratrooper regiments, the 506 was made up of 3 battalions, each of which was made up of 3 companies of, at least on paper, 125 men each, with Abel, Baker and Charlie companies forming the 1st battalion, Dog, Easy and Fox the 2nd, and George, Howe and Item the 3rd. Our focus lies with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Strayer's 2nd battalion, and specifically Captain Richard Winters' E Company. Winters himself was already something of a legend in the airborne. Having taken command of Easy on D-Day when his company commander's plane was shot down, he had led an assault on a German gun battery at Breakour Manor, earning the Distinguished Service Cross in the process. Since then, he'd fought at Carentan, the Bloody Gulch, and in the assault on Noonan in Operation Market Garden, and he was still only 26 years old. The role of Easy Company and the 506th generally, having moved up to relieve British troops on the northwestern part of the island, was to push northwards towards the lower Rhine, consolidate the ground won and prevent enemy incursions across the river. So, by the 4th of October 1944, Company E were based right here around the village of Randvik, around 1 kilometre south of the river, though with responsibility of holding this 2 kilometre stretch of line, which also included taking over several key outpost positions with views across the river. Little did they know, but this same area had also fallen within the German gaze as they prepared to launch their own attack. Let's take a moment to explore the area a little better. By overlaying this wartime aerial image, taken on the 6th of September 1944 by Allied reconnaissance aircraft, onto the modern map, we can see that this area has hardly changed over the last 8 decades. Still visible here to the southwest is the village of Randvik, from which, and running parallel to the Rhine, is an embanked roadway or dike leading to the village of Heteren. Just here is a small crossroads, from which another, lower raised road heads northwards across the flat farmers' field to the southern bank of the river and a ferry crossing point. Across the fields themselves run a series of small drainage ditches, which, by blending back out to the modern image, we can see still lie in exactly the same position they did in October 1944. In short, the German plan to assault this area was to send an entire division crashing across the island from the northwest, drive the Allies back and retake both the island and the Waal River crossing at Nijmegen, some 15 kilometres to the southeast. In order to aid that attack, on the night of the 4th, 5th of October, 2 full companies of SS had silently crossed the Rhine just here and moved into these fields to launch a diversionary assault the following morning, which would draw Allied eyes away from the main German thrust. But all of that was unknown to Captain Winters, who, though close to the Rhine, did not have eyes on the river itself. To remedy that, at 3:30 am on the 5th of October, Winters ordered a patrol to push northeastwards and occupy a building right here and report on enemy movement on the opposite bank. That patrol of 4 men, led by Sergeant Art Human, with PFCs Ali, Lesniewski and Stroll, immediately set off, following the southern edge of this dike on what they hoped would be an uneventful journey through unoccupied territory. Very soon, they found out otherwise. Approaching this position right here some 20 minutes later, Sergeant Human ordered Lesniewski to climb to the top of the dike for a better view northwards. Just as he did so, and only a handful of meters away, he was met by the sight of a heavily manned German machine gun whose crew had clearly spotted him. In just a few seconds, a shower of grenades rained down on the patrol, wounding every man, with Ali receiving a staggering 32 wounds to his face, neck and arm. Incredibly, in the chaos that followed, all men reached safety, reporting to Captain Winters at 4:20 am exactly what they'd found. Knowing that there should be no German presence south of the river, Winters immediately called forward one squad from his 1st platoon along with Sergeant Boyle and his radio from company headquarters to go out and investigate. Following the same route as Human's patrol an hour earlier, the 15-man group used the shelter of the dike to reach this spot, from which they could see and hear the intermittent fire of the machine gun crew firing southwards, presumably in error as there were actually no Allied troops in that area. Realising his opportunity, he first tried to call in artillery support on the radio. No luck. Knowing then he would have to take on the gun himself, he crawled over this section of the roadway, luckily unseen, before calling across the rest of his squad, minus 2 men left to protect his flank, before assembling all in this shallow ditch north of the road. Leaving his men in cover, Winters advanced alone some 250 metres before spotting the gun and 7-man crew silhouetted at the top of the embankment. Quickly he turned around and crawled back to his patrol, bringing them back to the same spot. Winters recalled the moment. We reached a position about 40 yards from the machine gun as dawn approached. I halted the patrol and instructed Sergeant Dukeman and Corporal Christensen to set up our machine gun. I then went to each man and in a whisper assigned each a target on the German machine gun crew with instructions to fire on my command. Next I stepped back and raising my voice a bit louder said, "Ready, aim, fire." The rifle fire was good, but our machine gun fired a bit high. 3 Germans started running for the other side of the dike. I joined in with my M1, as did everybody else. In short order, we accounted for all 7 enemy soldiers. They had poked the hornet's nest. Moments later, a heavy rifle fire was opened up on the patrol from the road to their front, causing Winters to order a rushed withdrawal as the 15 men fell back 260 metres to take up position in this shallow ditch. It was whilst in this spot that 23-year-old William Dukeman was hit and killed by a German rifle grenade fired from the culvert they had occupied. Moving forward some 50 yards into the field from his precarious cover, Winters now had a moment to assess the situation. It was clear that there were enemies to his front behind a solid embankment, but how many? He had no idea. He did though know that his position was a very unhealthy one. Not only was he likely outnumbered, but running across the entire length of his right flank was that 20-foot high roadway that would offer perfect cover for an enemy moving along his flank. In addition, he also knew that to his right, the ground for at least 3/4 of a mile was completely open to the enemy. As soon as they realised this, surely they would outflank him, trap his small patrol against the Rhine and annihilate them. He had to act. As was his way on more than one occasion, Winters was decisive. Calling up the remainder of 1st Platoon over the radio, along with the light machine gun section, they were soon reinforced by squads under Lieutenant Peacock and Staff Sergeant Floyd Talbot, bringing their number to 35 men. Winters' plan was simple. Using Lieutenant Rice's machine guns to provide covering fire, the 3 squads, with Talbot on the right, Peacock on the left and Winters in the centre, would fix bayonets and charge directly across the field to this roadway, a distance of 265 metres, and engage whatever lay beyond. It was incredibly risky. Here's Winters again. I assembled 2nd Squad and explained the plan. Don Hubler was standing right in front of me. When I said, "Fix bayonets," he took a big swallow. I can remember seeing his Adam's apple make a difficult trip up and down his throat. Hubler's adrenaline was flowing. My adrenaline was pumping too. I'd never been so pumped up in my life. On the smoke signal, the base of fire commenced and all 3 columns started their dash across the 175 to 200 yards of level field. I was a good athlete in school, but I'm sure I ran that 200 yards faster than I'd ever run 200 yards in my life. Just a minute later, Winters, alone, having outstripped his men, reached the roadway and immediately encountered a German sentry. In a split second, both men hurled grenades towards each other, and incredibly, neither went off. Upon throwing, Winters immediately realised his error. Although he had taken the pin from his grenade, he'd forgotten to remove the tape he habitually used to stop them going off accidentally. Realising this, he mounted the roadway and saw the German sentry taking cover, still waiting for the explosion. It was all the time he needed. He fired from the hip and killed the man right there. Turning now to his right to this patch of field, he was shocked to find at less than 20 yards range the first of more than 100 SS men sheltering, totally unaware of his presence. Taking aim from just here, he fired 15 rounds into the dense mass of the enemy before finally 3rd Squad under Floyd Talbot arrived to his right and added their own fire to the now chaotic scene. In the next few seconds, and it was only that, dozens of men fell as Peacock's squad also arrived and thumped round after round into the disorganised mass who began fleeing back towards the Rhine. At the same time that the men on the roadway opened up, the machine guns began to redeploy and joined their comrades just here in time to see another panicked mass of perhaps 100 SS men come streaming across this embankment directly into their path. It was a bloodbath. Dozens more men fell dead or wounded, with the remainder fleeing at top speed towards the ferry crossing back over the Rhine. In just a handful of minutes, 35 men had bested 2 full companies of SS in this unassuming patch of ground in the Dutch countryside. But, unlike in the series, the fight wasn't over. With the support of a platoon of Fox Company, Winters and his men turned north to pursue the fleeing Germans and capture the southern bank of the Rhine. Advancing along this track, they made it to right here before themselves being struck by enemy fire from around 75 Germans concealed in this field. Finally, at risk of being cut off, in feeling that his job had been done, he ordered his men to withdraw back to the safety of the raised embankment where the German machine gun had stood. Just as the last few men arrived, a heavy barrage of German mortars slammed into the rear ranks, wounding 18 men, including Sergeant Boyle, who played a prominent part throughout the action. It had been a clear victory for the men of the 506, who had surprised and routed a much stronger force, but not a free one. All told, 1 man, William Dukeman, had been killed and a further 22 wounded. The Germans, on the other hand, had suffered far more heavily, with perhaps 50 men killed and at least twice as many wounded, along with 7 prisoners taken, who were, as described in the TV series, escorted back to the rear by a slightly wounded Private Joe Liebgott, who had just 1 round in his rifle. All arrived. The actions of Captain Winters and the men under his command right here on the 5th of October 1944 played a significant role in stopping the planned German assault to recapture the island, which was destined to remain in Allied hands for the remainder of the war. Today, that location is marked only by this small memorial, which stands close to where the German machine gun position once did. But for all those men who once fought here, it's a place they would never forget. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not try out our dedicated podcast, World War II, Both Sides of the Wire, where each week our expert historians Jesse Alexander and Professor Matthias Strone examine many of the most famous episodes of the conflict from both the Allied and Axis perspectives. That's all this time. We'll see you again soon.